question and answer session, but truly a listening session where we hear from you, our diverse community. We will be spending a little time together to hear from you, but there are a few things we want to cover up front. But first of all, I would like to introduce the mayor of Bellevue, Lynn Robinson.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here again, and I'm just so grateful for the participation of our community. I know this is a weekend, and we've all got things we need to do, and for you to take the time to join us on this call is so appreciated, and it's very valuable. I'm so happy to have Kevin Henry emceeing again. Kevin Henry and I are good friends, and he pioneered all the diversity programs at the City of Bellevue. So we're very lucky to have him in his role. And I'm really impressed with the work of the consultants so far. This is our third gathering together, and it's a good conversation, and the input from the community is just incredibly valuable. So please feel free to share your stories, share recommendations that you have. I think that, when this is all done, some of you will be pleased with the work that the police department and the City of Bellevue is already doing. And some of you will have recommendations on how we can do a better job. And it's so important that we be the best we can be for everybody in Bellevue and everybody who comes into Bellevue. So this is a great opportunity to kind of look at our programs, see how we can be better, and make positive change. On behalf of the entire Bellevue City Council, we welcome you here today. I want you to feel that this is a safe space for you to be, to verbalize your comments, put them in the chat, email them. There's many ways to convey your information to us, but it's just really important for you to give us your thoughts on things so that we can compile them and make our city even better for everybody that lives here. So thank you, everybody. Have a great session.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Robinson. So now we're going to go through some logistical stuff, which is really important. And so I'll kind of go slowly, and so everybody can actively participate without dealing with any technical issues. So please note that everyone is muted throughout this meeting, but we will be inviting people to unmute themselves during the discussion to share any comments. You can click on this symbol at the bottom of the screen to see a list of participants. This also brings up a bar where there is a raised hand icon. Please click this icon to let us know you wish to comment. For those of you that have joined us by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. We will also have the chat window available so people can chat in the comment section. Please note the chat window may open up floating over the presentation. You can move it to where it's comfortable for you. We have a few slides to share, and you can move this slider to make the main window larger or smaller. You can choose to highlight whoever is speaking in the speaker view or see everyone by choosing gallery view. Finally, for those that are joining us on Zoom, we will be providing closed captioning via Otter AI. If you wish to see the closed captions, click on the little triangle and then choose View Live Notes. This will separate the window that you can then resize to fit your preferences. Please note, if you are using Internet Explorer, you will need to choose Copy Link, then paste it into a separate window. Now, I know that's all a lot to take in, so you can also make a comment in the chat box that you would like to speak, and we will call on you. Please note that these sessions are being live streamed on BTV and will be recorded for future viewing. The content captured on the BTV recording of this meeting, including anything the audience shares in the chat and screen share features, are a public record and subject to public disclosure pursuant to the Public Records Act. Use of video or photo is encouraged to facilitate a town hall meeting, but is not required for you to participate. We will try to get to everyone who wishes to speak, but may not as time allows. If you have something to share but choose not to be recognized, you can choose the chat function. You can also take a survey and provide comments at Engaging Bellevue at the Engaging Bellevue website. We have provided a link in the chat. The Engaging Bellevue website will be available until October 30th, or you can email your comments to us. Please see the link for that email in the chat too. While you can email your comments at any time, we are also asking that any comments be provided by October 30th so that they can be incorporated into the information provided to the outside review firm. We'll be using a few polls right here in the beginning of the session. So let's test out the first one. The way this will work is we will share a link in the chat window. When you click on that link, it will open another window that will ask you a question. You answer the question and then close the question window and return to this Zoom meeting. Remember to just close the window with the polling question. The results will display real time in this Zoom meeting. You have about 1 or 2 minutes. Okay, just about another minute. Okay, thank you so much for participating. And now we're going to move forward to the introduction of our facilitators for today. We will close that poll in just a few minutes. The City of Bellevue has hired an outside review firm, the Office of Independent Review Group, to lead the policy analysis and these listening forums, as well as provide their recommendations to the City Council. They will take a few minutes to introduce themselves and their backgrounds. Mr. Mike Giannacco is the founding principal of the OIR group. And now, Mr. Giannacco.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Mayor, for kicking off today's meeting, as you have with the other listening sessions. It's great again to be part of this program today. Again, as Kevin indicated, my name is Mike Giannacco, and I am part of the consultants that have been asked to, one, facilitate these listening sessions as well as other targeted sessions throughout the next couple weeks. And also step 2 of our project is to review the City of Bellevue Police Department's use of force policies. So what the city has done is integrated these listening sessions and asked us to facilitate them so that when we start reviewing the policies, our review would be informed by the participation, perspective, insight, and recommendations of the larger community of Bellevue. We don't live in Bellevue, but you all do, or in some way connected to the city in a way different than ours. So we think that that symbiosis of having the perspectives from local folks and then sort of integrated with our familiarity and expertise in police reform and police progressive policies of policing will end up with a better product, and I am confident that will actually occur. I want to introduce you to my colleagues for today's meeting. Julie Rulin has been with OIR Group for close to 20 years and is also a police practice professional. Julie and I both do not have law enforcement background, but we have worked closely with law enforcement in our roles as providing oversight to law enforcement and providing independent auditing to police agencies throughout the country. So Julie, could you wave and say hello? Well, we'll be getting to Julie in a minute. Also with us today is Perry Tarrant. Perry has agreed to partner with our team for this facilitation session, and he has a connection to the Northwest that we do not. Perry has had a long and distinguished career as a law enforcement professional, retired from that profession several years ago. And since that time has been also working as a police practices and police reform professional. Two important notes to know about Perry. One is he is the past president of NOBLE, which stands for the National Association of Black Law Enforcement. And he also has facilitated a number of other listening sessions throughout the country. Maybe one most remarkably was during the concern of the shooting that occurred in Ferguson, Missouri by police. He helped facilitate some listening session after that event. Perry, could you just wave to the crowd, to the group?
Good morning.
And we'll be hearing from Perry in a minute as well. Before I turn this over to the team, I just want to remind folks some of what Kevin said, but just to remind you that our task is going to be to review police use of force policies. In order to do that, we have enlisted the assistance of folks like you to provide that community engagement. We will be providing a public report of our findings and recommendations on improving use of force policies to City Council, but we are here first to listen to your voices. You should be reminded that this is not a question and answer session, and we don't have any prepared material. We also aren't here to specifically review incidents of use of force, but we will take any comments that you have. There may be other issues the community wishes to cover, and they will be noted, but today our focus will be to hear from you about your experience and concerns with Bellevue's use of force policies. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Julie for next steps. Julie?
Good morning, everyone, and almost afternoon. Thank you all for being here. We are eager to start to hear your comments, but a couple more preliminaries before we get to that. And the first is a set of meeting agreements that we'd like everyone to acknowledge and respect here today. We understand that the passions of this community on these issues, and we would also like to set out some ground rules for this engagement to keep things productive and respectful. So I'll go through these meeting agreements. I will share this time with other community members. I will allow others to speak their truth. I will listen to understand. I will listen respectfully. I may choose not to speak at all. I will be mindful of how long I take up the airspace. I will speak from my own experience. I will not assume for others. I will respectfully disagree if necessary, and will say why. Everyone here today is asked to be respectful of the lived experiences and opinions of others. Your experience and opinions are important to us, so all attendees are strongly encouraged to aid in maintaining the decorum and orderly progression of this listening session. Shouting over a speaker, using profanity or slurs against others, disruptive noises, off-topic comments not related to the current discussion questions, or behavior that intentionally disrupts, disturbs, or otherwise impedes attendance or participation detracts from the host's ability to conduct a productive session. Where such conduct substantially disrupts, interrupts, delays, or disturbs the peace and good order of this session, the host may issue a warning and the individual may be removed from the virtual meeting. This is the third listening session we've done, and we appreciate everybody acknowledging these agreements. We have not had issues. We have been impressed by how respectful and kind everyone has been while they're sharing their opinions, and we expect that is going to continue today. We have another poll question. If we could pull that up. We just are trying to understand what is motivating you to join this discussion today. So it's just a simple question. Why did you join us today? Open-ended. You can give us as much detail or as little detail as you wish, or as your typing speed dictates. If you could just kind of let us know, what it is that caused you to be willing to give up some time on your Saturday morning here to talk about these issues. What's important to you, and what do you hope to get from this? And while I give you all some time to respond, I don't know if I have a problem with, there we go. We've got some. Thank you. I'll just talk a little bit about what is motivating the city to want to conduct these and facilitate these listening sessions. As the mayor has said, Bellevue is committed to learning how it can better serve its residents with respect to the police department's use of force practices and policies. Use of force, it's an important topic. We give law enforcement officers the authority to use force, but we expect that with that authority, that they will use it wisely, and it comes with a responsibility to use it only when necessary. And that also brings an obligation for police leaders and city leaders to carefully and thoughtfully review the ways in which officers exercise their authority to use force. So it was with that obligation in mind that the city council and the mayor made a pledge. And that pledge has 4 parts. The 4 parts are to review the police use of force policies, to engage the community by including a diverse range of input, experiences, and stories in that review, to report on the findings of that review, and to seek feedback from the community, and then to reform the police use of force policies in line with all of these prior 3 steps. And that is part of why we're here today. This forum and the other 2 sessions we've done, and the sessions we'll do in the coming week, are all part of that commitment to examine the police department's use of force. This Zoom session is where we want to hear from the community about their experiences with Bellevue's use of force policy and the police department. There's a link that we will insert in the chat for your reference. Before we finally get to hearing what you have to say, we do have one final poll question to try to get some specific feedback about your level of familiarity with use of force policies. The link that we put in the chat has a lot of information to digest, and it's not easily synthesized into a few points on a slide. Please remember that you have the opportunity to provide your comments at the Engaging Bellevue website or via email. Links to both of those will be provided periodically throughout this session. So I think we want to keep the polls open for another couple minutes, but I would like to kick it over to Perry at this point. Perry, let's start to hear what people have to say. Feel free to put your blue hands up and join in this conversation.
Thank you, Julie. And again, that poll will continue to be open for a few more minutes, but I want to note that it looks like that the majority of folks who've already responded are somewhat familiar with Bellevue Police Department's existing policy. As many of you know, the national narrative has covered a lot of ground related to community concerns about policing around the country. The city is committed to focus their discussion on the use of force policies. While you may have additional comments about other matters, and we'll take note of those, but this session focuses on use of force. The City Council's pledge is specifically focused on the community's experience and concerns regarding the City of Bellevue Police Department's use of force policies. And again, we truly want to hear from you about your experiences, your concerns, and also your input. And so I'm going to start with, is it Tanea?
Yes, Perry, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, City of Bellevue. I'd like to begin by expressing my gratitude to Mayor Robinson and the Bellevue City Council for signing the pledge in June, committing the City of Bellevue to the process of review for police use of force policies. Today, I speak solely in my individual capacity as Timia Seuss, resident of Bellevue. It's also in this capacity that I express my support for the Bellevue Police Department and Police Chief Milet. Today, we have the opportunity to engage. We engage in this dialogue on behalf of those who are not here today. Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Philando Castile, Tamir Rice, Sandra Bland, Alton Sterling. Our very humanity compels us to do more than merely acknowledge the deep suffering and outrage felt in communities across our nation. It also requires us to lean into our own grief. Grief galvanizes. Every one of us is here in this virtual capacity because something has compelled us to be here. What compels me is the absolute conviction that we can foster a more compassionate system of policing, and that it's actually our civic duty to do so. A system in which citizens play a more direct role, precisely like this listening session. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "A riot is the language of the unheard." What is it that we are not hearing? While we must be grounded by our moral compass, the laws which govern policing don't posit a moral imperative. Instead, they provide guidance on the situations in which use of force is permissible and to what extent. We fully acknowledge the risks inherent in the policing profession and the courage it takes to risk one's life in the line of duty, which is precisely why I'm here today to discuss section 01.00.070 of the Bellevue Police Department Policy Manual, the use of chemical agents, specifically as it pertains to future instances of the exercise of the First Amendment right of people to peaceably assemble. The language reads as follows. Chemical agents other than pepper spray will be used only when necessary by officers specifically trained in their use and only with the authorization of a command officer. We look to the definitions earlier provided to define necessary, which is under the circumstances as they reasonably appear to the officer at the time. 1, no reasonably effective alternative to the use of physical force, firearm, weapon, or device appeared to exist. And 2, officer believed in good faith and on reasonable grounds that the amount of force used was reasonable to effect the lawful purpose intended. This language provides us with the legal standards. We are all aware that 2020 is an absolutely unprecedented year in many respects. And were it not for a succession of events which involved the constitutional exercise of the right to assembly, it would not be a prudent use of my time right now to be discussing what we could safely assume to be an obscure section within a use of force manual. And yet, here we are. On June 9th, 2020, the ACLU of Washington, the Korematsu Center, and Perkins Coie filed a lawsuit on behalf of Black Lives Matter, Seattle King County, to stop the use of chemical agents and projectiles for crowd control. We are not an island, and if the City of Bellevue is to succeed in its stated mission, we have to address what is currently a policy which sanctions the use of chemical agents against human beings. I strongly recommend that the City of Bellevue consider the following question in light of both the rule of law and human rights. Are there any situations which warrant the use of chemical agents deployed on its citizens? While litigation against the City of Seattle is happening on the grounds of the constitutional violations involved with the deploying of chemical agents against lawful assemblies, we cannot sit in silence when the Bellevue Police Department also has the same language on its books. In fact, we have to be proactive in revising this language pertaining to the use of chemical agents. So if we have a daughter or son who tells us that they want to go stand in solidarity to express their views, we don't sit in fear of what could happen. Additionally, I also encourage the City of Bellevue to consider Article 21 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, a legally binding treaty ratified by the United States in 1992 with the status of federal law, which reads, "The right of peaceful assembly shall be recognized. No restrictions may be placed on the exercise of this right other than those imposed in conformity with the law and which are necessary in a democratic society in the interests of national security or public safety, public order, the protection of public health or morals, or the protection of the rights and freedoms of others." And so I invite all of us to engage in this very important question. What will we justify in the name of public order? Thank you.
Thank you. And again, everyone's input and everyone's voice is absolutely important to this process. And again, the city of Bellevue has elected to engage in this process and was not driven to this process and have invited any and all voices to be heard on Bellevue Police Department's use of force policy and the reform of that policy going forward into the future. So again, I want to thank you for your comments and your input. I'm looking forward to and happy to acknowledge the comments and the input of others who are listening and with us today. Your concerns, your experience, or your recommendations for policy improvements, policy modifications, or policy support related to the use of force in the city of Bellevue.
Hi, this is Kevin Henry again. I just wanted to remind people, in case they've come in late, that if you wish to use the Zoom feature to raise your hand, you can type in the chat and you can provide a comment there. So really looking forward to hearing the diverse voices and opinions. This is a very timely subject considering what's been going on the last 7 or 8 months. So we really encourage you to participate. Thanks again.
I will say that this conversation is, in fact, necessary and is definitely driven by events that have taken place nationally over the last few years. And I'm going to acknowledge user. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Someone has logged in or identified themselves as user, and go ahead and unmute your mic if you'd like to make a comment. A lot of the incidents that Tamia identified, I had the opportunity to be involved in several of those. I was in Cleveland and doing follow-up on Tamir Rice. I was in Falcon Heights, Minnesota, following Philando Castillo. There are some similarities across those events, and you're absolutely right. Not only are we having a local discussion, but a regional discussion, but the influence that the Bellevue City Council and the police chief currently have are fairly localized. And we are looking forward to that input from you folks in terms of what you would like to see in a use of force policy for the city of Bellevue. Hi, Debbie Lacey. Go ahead and unmute yourself. And you have the floor.
Hi, thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity. So I am Debbie Lacey. Full disclosure, I work for Eastside for All, which is a race and social justice advocacy organization. And so we connect with a lot of community members in Bellevue. And I just want to acknowledge that, first of all, I think that these listening sessions are wonderful and appreciated. And the format makes it very difficult for people to connect and share. Just because we say a space is safe doesn't make it so. And it is quite intimidating for a lot of us to share honestly in this kind of a forum. So I just wanted to name that because I'm certainly feeling that. and I do this for my work. I really want to encourage the city of Bellevue to continue to pay close attention to the great work brought forward and the advocacy brought forward by the Right to Breathe Committee. That's a phenomenal group. They're doing extensive, heavy carrying in our community right now. And I think that they need to continue to be supported and heard. And I know that they have put forward various recommendations related to this topic of use of force. I'm also particularly interested in the ongoing infrastructure of how communities support and hold accountable the policing in our communities. And so to that, I'm curious about and would like to recommend shifts in the ways that the community advisory groups for the police department are held and the ways that in which they're used. And I know that's already being explored, I believe. I had heard that the African American advisory group to the police was changing their leadership to allow for a co-chairing opportunity between the chief of police and another member of the committee who is not a police officer or a staff person for the city of Bellevue. And I'm curious if that same shift is also being applied to the other community advisory groups to the police. So I would certainly support that. And I think it's critical that that some other folks besides city staff and police are able to set those meeting agendas and support community members in really getting their voices heard at those meetings, if that is one of the key ways that the city of Bellevue will bridge concerns from the community with the police department. Thank you.
And thank you. And I do acknowledge the challenges of having this conversation via video, via recorded video, and how that may be somewhat off-putting. I've had similar conversations like this in person. And again, given the environment that we currently are living in with COVID-19, we didn't want to put these conversations off. We didn't want to have these conversations. And this was our next best alternative to exposing everyone or bringing people collectively together. So I do acknowledge the challenge of this particular format, and I also acknowledge your comments. Thank you very much.
Harry, it looks like the person who's identified as user has gotten him or herself unmuted. So maybe we want to go back if you'd like to speak.
If you can hear me.
We can.
So I had to unmute my phone since I'm speaking on the phone instead of through the website. I'll be brief. I've sent 11 or 12 written examples to the council pledge email address. They're very thorough and complete with plenty of examples of why I think everyone deserves and needs to feel free of violence, especially here in Bellevue, from any police violence. And I think every color and nationality who fears this violence has to stand up. In my life, only 3 times have I personally experienced fairly extreme police aggression. This was in Chicago and Washington, D.C., and right here in Washington State. Each time I was alone, there were no witnesses, and it involved threatening hands-on police aggression toward me that was totally not warranted. These police acts personally changed me emotionally, and that's why I feel I have to speak up on behalf of people that of color or who are not being looked after in the city of Bellevue. I can't even fathom what Black and brown people and their children must endure. My wife has Native American heritage and her father side, so she gets it. That needless aggression against any American or any international visitor to Bellevue is brutality in the worst way. It's a true form of violence, and especially when it happens to the vulnerable people like the homeless men and women trying to survive here every day. So I would just encourage the city council and the city government and the city police to get this fixed now before it becomes some kind of total chaos and maybe even cause an autonomous zone to get set up in our own downtown city park next to our mall. My last point is for any of our Bellevue Police Department or city officials who may be listening in, that this problem is real. I've sent numerous examples in writing. I hardly ever get responded to, and if I do, it's nonsense. And I believe you know that this is real, and you know it's been real for several years now. That's my belief anyway, and the facts seem clear to me. And racial and social justice is our foundation for a democratic society. So thank you if you're listening in. Thank you.
And thank you for your comments and your input. I appreciate that. And I'm intimately aware of how law enforcement contact can certainly have an impact and or change the direction of your life. That's how I got into law enforcement decades ago. Yeah, it was from a contact with law enforcement that I thought could have gone much better. So I've been on this road of reforming and participating in this conversation for decades. But out of those somewhere between 16 and 18,000 different police departments and jurisdictions out there, we're having a conversation specifically about what would you like to see Bellevue put forward in its policies going forward. And again, we're here to listen to you. And again, for those folks who are joining us or joined us after we got started, we are having a conversation, and this is, again, our intention here is to listen to you and get your input into Bellevue's future. Lisa Kay, go ahead.
Hi. First of all, I could not change my how I'm listed on this forum, and it has my business along with my name on there. And I just want to say that I'm not representing my business. I just couldn't really change it. The second thing I want to say is that I have the utmost respect for police. And it is disconcerting to me that that the police are sometimes making decisions that hurt people and sometimes kill people. That breaks my heart. I don't really know specifically what the Bellevue Police Department policies are. I just know that sometimes when I'm on a platform like TikTok or sometimes TV, I will sometimes hear police officers say, you know, criminals aren't going to go by the rules. And so, you know, we have to do what needs to be done because we're dealing with people who aren't going to go by the rules. And I find it heartbreaking that there are some police officers who do not believe that the policies that are there will keep them safe. And I am wondering if perhaps there's an opportunity to have better training so that, you know, how to de-escalate, hopefully, situations and deal with situations are just muscle memory. And I don't know what's done. So I could be really saying ignorant things. And I hope that there is an opportunity for police officers to safely say, I don't think these policies will keep me safe. And I don't think these policies will address situations that need to be addressed, because sometimes people who are hurt are doing nothing short of exercising their right to free speech or driving in a car, or, I mean, you know, we just hear these stories, and I'm looking at what I see on a platform like TikTok, so I can't specifically say Bellevue Police Department. And yet I am hoping that there is a safe way for police officers to share when they think it's not enough and it's not safe, and for them to be a part of the voice of shaping and training and executing those policies. Because I think the best solutions come forth when lots and lots of people are listened to in a safe way. So I do appreciate this forum. I'm sorry that it isn't something that leaves everyone feeling safe about giving their voice, but there are just some things I hear that break my heart, because sometimes what I look at really does look like it's just not necessary. That level of force isn't necessary. There were other ways that things could be resolved. And again, I'm unaware and inexperienced. I respect the police, and I'm glad they are here. Watching the death of George Floyd changed me forever. I just can't let that happen and be silent and voiceless. And I may be, you know, ignorant and have implicit biases and be unaware, but I'm so committed to not being that way anymore, but need to do it in a way that also keeps how I was raised in place, which was to, my dad was a Navy man. I just respect anyone in a uniform. And it breaks my heart when sometimes I hear things that might be that, that policies are being ignored, and maybe even policies put in place that are excessive out of a belief that there's no way to de-escalate it and there's no way to stay safe unless horrible things happen and people are considered expendable. So I guess my thought is I hope that there's a place at the table for police officers, and I hope that as a community and police department and members of each, that we can come up with a different way of doing things, because people shouldn't die because they were driving a car or walking down a street. As a matter of fact, you know, it's not a capital offense to rob a store or do all these other horrible things, that it isn't a death penalty case. So thank you for an opportunity for you to listen and for putting up with lots of vague comments. But I just wanted to kind of share some of my thoughts on that, because it isn't completely about policy. It's also about training and execution of policy, and maybe, yeah. So thank you for letting me speak.
And thank you for your comments. And I didn't perceive them as being random and uninformed, because that is a conversation we are having. We will have a conversation or a session specifically with officers in Bellevue about policy. But what's crucial about policy is policy does two things, or three things in my opinion. The first thing is it absolutely dictates training. It dictates training and practices, but more. And then the third piece is it dictates accountability. So we are having that conversation as we're talking about policy with or use of force policy in the city of Bellevue. Tracy F., please go ahead.
Hi, thank you to the mayor and the council for providing this opportunity. We love to hide behind euphemisms. So we have euphemisms like less lethal force. People don't end up partly dead or mostly dead. They end up dead. So we need to think about these measures, these activities, these methods as being potentially lethal, not less lethal, and view their use and make policies for their use with that in mind. As Lisa said, somebody shouldn't end up dead because they were in a traffic stop. That's ridiculous, unless they're putting a police officer in actual genuine risk of his life. But if it's just a traffic stop, that doesn't warrant somebody ending up dead. I think a lot of the methods are on a continuum. Some are more often lethal than others. Pepper spray can kill. Ballistic rounds can definitely kill. The thing I'd like to focus on in my comment really is choke holds and so-called sleeper holds. Sleeper hold sounds so benign, so gentle, but these vascular neck restraints can kill, do kill. They can cause strokes, they can cause permanent brain injuries. These can manifest immediately, they can manifest weeks or months after the incident. Even in training, in the supposedly safe and controlled situation of training, the use of these vascular neck restraints have caused strokes in the officers who are part of the training session. So I actually want to applaud and thank the police chief for taking the decision to stop on a temporary basis the use of vascular neck restraints and choke holds. And I would like to make the strong request that we consider making that a permanent prohibition, that these restraints not be used unless true lethal force is warranted in the situation. So that's all I wanted to say.
And thank you for your comments and your input.
I just wanted to acknowledge a few of the comments I've seen in the chat about a desire to have a little more transparency and be able to learn more about use of force data coming out of the police department. And so happy to, hear more about that if people want to make specific comments about that in the conversation. But I also just wanted to acknowledge that we see that and understand that point. And then I see another comment here about a duty to intervene, or a question about whether officers are required to intervene and report when another officer is using excessive force. And I'd like to hear more of your comments about that. If people want to talk about that in the discussion, there is a suggestion that maybe there ought to be a program to encourage peer intervention and have that be worked into the policy and practice of the police department. So happy to hear more about those topics if anyone wants to share on those or anything else.
Thank you, Julie, for pulling that information out of the chat. And again, we do want to hear from you. This is not us with a prepared program. This is us, all ears, listening to your comments, your input, and your recommendations as we not only review the City of Bellevue Police Department's use of force policy, but also there's an opportunity for the City of Bellevue and its police chief and department to modify and update its policies. So again, we want to hear from you.
Another comment that's being set out in the chat is whether use of force in Bellevue or elsewhere in King County is being looked at through an equity lens. There have been studies in the past in other jurisdictions that suggest that the demographic data suggests that people of color are more often arrested, searched, and subject to use of force than people than others. And I guess that ties again back to the data request and whether that data provides that kind of demographic breakdowns in your city regarding use of force. So if anyone has anything further, I'm just repeating what I think I'm paraphrasing what I'm seeing in the chat, but if anyone wants to bring that theme forward in other ways, by all means. And we have a sufficiently intimate group, at least today, that those of you who have already spoken, if you have other thoughts or have been prompted, other things have been prompted as a result of the discussion, feel free to, again, raise your hand.
And user, if you're still on the phone and would like to comment, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
What struck me was your comment, Perry, after my statement that you said that you're looking for ways to correct the situations that are occurring in Bellevue. I read the AOR, is that the right term? ORI studies that were done in King County this year, and in 2018, the King County Sheriff's Office. I read the whole report, both of them, because I watched the first presentation that was done last week or earlier this week. And as I looked at those reports and saw all the recommendations, I can't imagine that we should not at least adopt all of the ones, every single one that was recommended for King County, because we are in King County, we're part of King County. King County comes here. If we have problems, we go over there. If Seattle has problems. So we're all in the same boat, the same soup, so to speak. So I have already recommended to the City Council of Bellevue that they adopt as a minimum all the findings that were done in King County. So that's my comment.
And thank you. Mike, do you want to speak to that at all?
Well, I appreciate the recommendation. So just for the rest of you to get a better understanding of what the speaker was talking about, we have conducted 2 reviews for OLEO, which is the Office of Law Enforcement Monitoring for the King County Sheriff's Office. And we were asked by the oversight group to review 2 deputy involved shootings that raised some issues within the county. And so what the user was referencing were the recommendations that we made coming out of those reviews, both in February of this year and then more recently last month. For those of you who may be interested, you can review those reports by going on to OLEO's website and hearing that. But some of the recommendations did touch on use of force issues, of course. Perry, I see Debbie Lacey with her hand up.
And Debbie, go ahead, please.
Thanks again for allowing folks to comment another time. After sitting here listening for this amount of time, I wanted to clarify some of my earlier comments because I don't know that it was articulated well enough, and this will save me writing an email later. So I found this session to be particularly frustrating today and disappointing. I do not think that this is a way to really engage and fully hear the experiences of Black and Brown people in our community, to create the space for them to share those experiences honestly. I no doubt that that was the intent. I understand that was probably the intent. But when I know that I have seen many things that the city of Bellevue has put out with tremendous staff that they have with expertise in providing conversations that are really supportive and personal and allow people to share openly, this has been very challenging to experience today. I think that moving forward, with such an important topic like this and a great deal of hurt happening in the community, it's imperative that our leadership create honest, true, supportive forums where people can share, and to not see a huge group of people of color on here today expressing themselves, I think is it's multifaceted. It is not just because of the format. There's a lot of lack of trust, obviously, and a lot of hurt. But we have to do better as a community. Our leadership needs to do better to create forums where it's possible for people to really speak up and be heard. And I understand the format needs to be online because of COVID, but there's a lot that we can do online that really nurtures and supports people to share. And I hope that we can see more of that moving forward. Thank you.
Well, and I'm going to ask you to give me a little bit more information if you're willing to, Debbie, in terms of a better vehicle or a better format to address this. I will also say that we do have some very specific sessions also scheduled across a broad spectrum for that very reason, is because we want to reach out specifically to a variety of interests and make sure that there is voice to that. But I would love to hear your feedback on how we could make this less frustrating for you. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I think more transparency in the invitation and the event description, first off, would have been helpful. I feel this is more like a public hearing setting, and I was coming to a listening session, and even though I knew it would be recorded and put out live, it just, even I wasn't in the headspace for this kind of a format today. So I think more transparency around what you all mean about a listening session may be very different from what the community understands to be a listening session. I think that I thought we were going to have breakout groups today. Maybe we still will, but breakout groups are more intimate. They're smaller and they allow for more sharing, particularly if those are facilitated. And I don't know what all the requirements are when it's a public meeting, et cetera. I know there's just different constraints that can take place that make it difficult. But that's certainly something that helps. And again, I just think that the transparency and really fully explaining what people are showing up for is helpful in advance. And then there's just there's a lot of techniques and all kinds of facilitation ways to support people to be in conversation and connect with one another. Thank you.
Thank you. We still have time and space available for those folks who would like to, again, provide your experience, your concerns, and your recommendations. Camilla, please go ahead. Am I saying your name right? Am I getting that?
Tamia. Tamia. Thank you. I certainly appreciate the sentiments that were expressed by the speaker previous to me. I think that many times people are very much informed by perhaps their profession or the activities that they engage in that leads them to perceive things a little bit differently. So full disclosure, I'm a law student. And so last night I went and I read through the entire policy manual. And because I do have this experience of reading law, of course, in my textbooks, I would have approached it very differently last year when I was working in a social work capacity. I would have had very different understanding of what necessity means, of what proportionality means, about what lawful use of force entails. And so I think it's important that we do acknowledge that there are the lived experiences of people, and then there's also the professional experiences. And it is imperative that we hold space for all of those, in particular, because we do perceive things like what constitutes a listening session. I think for me, because I went and looked up, who is this organization that will then take this data in, I had probably a different sense of what I should come and speak about. And I do want to reiterate that what I did prepare in advance is that I do think that there needs to be a revision of section 01.0070, the use of chemical agents, in particular to revise that language. However, because I do have different experiences prior to coming to law school where I was working with much more vulnerable communities, one of the policy recommendations that I think that the research shows is very effective is the use of embedded social workers. And so I think that there's a conversation about how do we facilitate connection? And I don't think that the burden should be placed solely on police officers who have very strictly defined duties in how they engage with the community. Whereas social workers also have very specific duties, but are much more able to really connect, to go out to talk to people who are experiencing homelessness, provide them with supportive services. And so if we sort of open up our perspective on what could potential policy solutions be, I do think that the embedded social workers are sort of the vehicle, as it were, for facilitating more connection, whereas they would be embedded within the police department, so privy to all of the information that police are privy to. But in addition to that, they come from a profession where they're specifically trained on how to connect with people. And ultimately, I think that this entire listening session is about connection. So voicing our concerns, but really connecting sort of disparate ideas and ideologies that we have. And it's 2020, I don't think that that's a surprise to anyone, but we have to sort of think about these in terms of policy recommendations. It's important to air our opinions as well, but we need to, if we're going to implement something, all of those pieces of data points have to be put cohesively into something that in the end result is it literally changes the language. And sometimes it changes one word, but those words are incredibly important, particularly when we think about use of force policies.
And again, thank you for your input. Thank you for your comments. And I want to go back to Debbie again. Yeah, this is not the ideal scenario for having an open dialogue. But again, there are some limitations with the current environment in which we are interacting. And I do appreciate everyone's comments and everyone's input. We still have some time left. And again, I do want to continue to have this conversation about use of force policy and policy recommendations in the city of Bellevue. The floor, the mic, the video is open to all voices, please. User, go ahead if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Sorry that these comments are waking up my mind to all the times that I've tried to converse in writing, in public settings, in meetings at City Hall with city leaders. And there's a policy in Bellevue. It's written, it's on their website, that if you go to speak to the city council on an issue, you get 3 minutes. You can barely give your name and address and make eye contact. and make your comments before you're shut off and there's no communication. I found that in every single department. I tried to address things in almost every department of the city, and they have a written policy of not responding to residents. So it's pretty pathetic. I don't like it. I think it needs to change, and I hope they're listening. Thank you.
And thank you.
Perry, I
Perry?
see.
Go ahead, Julie.
Yeah, I saw a couple of questions on the chat that I thought I might just turn back to the participants here and see what they think. And those questions have to do with investigations of use of force incidents. And the questions are whether an outside agency runs those investigations, and also whether officers are interviewed immediately after a shooting or a use of force incident. And so on those 2 points, again, as we said, we're here to listen to your views and not so much just answer questions. But what I'm interested is, from the person who wrote the chat or anyone who's participating here today, what do you think? Should there be, who should be conducting investigations of these incidents, and when should involved officers be interviewed? We'd be interested in hearing the community's views on those issues.
And just to follow on that, Julie, while our discussion is targeted on use of force policies, it will include a review of how force is reviewed within your police department, within Bellevue Police Department. So these are important questions. What kind of investigation should it be? Does it matter depending on the kind of force? Should an officer-involved shooting investigation be more robust and investigated differently than a use of baton or use of taser or use of pepper spray? And if that's the case, what does a use of pepper spray force review look like in the city? And what do the policies say to that currently? I know in Washington, there was a state law that was recently passed that requires for deadly force incidents to be investigated by another agency. So those are examples. I'm just using that as an example of how the review process ends up being important.
Well, we're coming up on the top of the hour, but there is still time. And I want to make sure that everyone who wants to speak has the opportunity to speak. We are here to listen for your input as this process moves forward.
And if you have comments and don't feel like you want to share them today, you always can go to the Engaging Bellevue website. There's the availability to that's in different languages, and you have the ability in different languages to make comments on that website. anything that comes to you after the session, or things that you didn't feel like you wanted to share during this session.
And Julie, while you have the floor, do you want to go ahead and talk about the next steps?
Yeah, we sure. We'll be as Mike said at the outset here, and I'll just say it again. We're taking all of the information that we hear today, as well as in the other listening sessions we've conducted, and things that we will be meetings that we will be having over the next couple of weeks. We're going to take all that information and use it to inform our review of the Bellevue Police Department use of force policies. And then we're going to form some recommendations to the Bellevue City Council regarding those policies. And we anticipate that's going to take us a couple of months to finalize and to write a report and make those recommendations to the City Council. I'm seeing some comments in the chat about de-escalation and a sense of disappointment, maybe that the police department in Bellevue has not fully embraced de-escalation. That is what I'm reading in the chat. So I'd be interested. We're definitely paying attention to the chat, and all of the comments that you're making in the chat will definitely be used to inform our review. So if that's where you feel comfortable making comments, but I also want to invite anybody who might want to talk about the importance of de-escalation and the importance of techniques that officers might use to avoid the use of force, and how you feel about those, and to what extent you think those need to be written into the policy and enforced, and as part of that policy that guides officers' actions. Again, I just want to say we appreciate all of the comments you're making in the chat. We're taking those down, and appreciate that. If that's the way you want to participate here today, I just want to reassure you that we are listening to those comments as they come in written form, as well as comments that are made orally today. I'm spending a lot of time reading here. It's more of a reading session than listening at this point, but that's all good.
And again, even if you're putting comments in the chat and those are being captured, this audio session, this opportunity to use your voice is also being captured as well. So I would encourage you to use either the chat or this open forum. Julie, anything additional, or are we close to turning it over to Kevin?
I think seeing no more blue hands, that we can start to wrap it up. So I will turn it back to Kevin. And again, just want to remind people, if you've got more comments to make, Engaging Bellevue website, we can maybe put the link back up there in the chat. I know it's been out there. And we really appreciate your thoughtful engagement today, and rest assured that all of your views are going to be very helpful to us in informing our review. So thank you.
Okay, well, I want to thank everybody for being here, and thank OIR for facilitating, and just really encourage people in Bellevue and beyond to stay connected and get involved with City Hall and the City of Bellevue. They need to hear your voices. I know it's challenging right now because of COVID, but whether it be city council meetings, board meetings, things like that, connect with the diversity group team that's there at the City of Bellevue. Hearing your voices is critical for developing policy and strategies year after year. So just wanted to thank everybody for your comments, for taking the time this afternoon, as well as letting you know that you can provide additional comments at the Engaging Bellevue website that's been inserted as a link into the chat. You can send that email to councilpledge@bellevue.gov. So I would encourage you to do that. I'm sure you might have some thoughts even tomorrow morning. So it's critical again that the city hears your voice, the diverse voices of Bellevue. As noted by OIR, the information gathered from this and other listening sessions, comments on the Engaging Bellevue website, and any comments received via email will be used by OIR as they prepare a report to be presented to the City Council in a timely manner. Information about future involvement as City Council engages on this topic will be posted on the city's webpage. So please check that frequently. A lot of good information, pertinent information there. Again, thank you for your time, your voices, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Take care. Have a good weekend.